The Kethzer warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel like predators emerging from dark water. 20 massive vessels, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, hung in space above Viridian Station. Their hulls were black as midnight, covered in angular armor that seemed to drink in the light from the nearby star. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the station's control center, watching the alien fleet on her screens. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She had known this day might come. The Kethzer Dominion had been sweeping through this region of space for 5 years, conquering every species they encountered. Now it was humanity's turn. "They're broadcasting," said Lieutenant Marcus Webb from his communications station. His voice was tight with fear. "Put it through," Chum said. The voice that filled the control center was cold and mechanical, filtered through translation software. "Human settlement designated Viridian Station. You are now property of the Kethzer Dominion. Surrender immediately. Resistance will result in total extermination of your species. You have 1 solar rotation to comply." The transmission ended. Silence filled the room. Chun looked around at her people. 43 security personnel, most of them trained for dealing with drunk miners, not alien invasions. 804 civilians, including 72 children. This wasn't a military base. It was a mining outpost on the edge of nowhere, so far from Earth that help would take months to arrive. "Commander?" Webb's voice was small. "What do we do?" Chun thought about her daughter back on Earth, about all the families on this station, about every human world that would follow if the Dominion wasn't stopped somewhere, somehow. She thought about surrender, about living as slaves under alien masters who saw humans as nothing more than animals to be owned. "Get me a station-wide channel," she said quietly. Webb's fingers danced across his console. "You're live, Commander." Chun took a breath. "This is Commander Chun. By now, you've all seen the alien fleet outside. You've heard their demands. I won't lie to you. We're outgunned, outmatched, and out of time. If we surrender, they'll probably let most of us live. We'll become part of their empire, subjects of their rule." She paused. "But I didn't come to the edge of human space to kneel to aliens. I came here to build something, to push our boundaries, to show that humans belong among the stars." Her voice grew harder. "I'm not surrendering. Not to them. Not today. Anyone who wants to evacuate, will load up the transport ships and send you toward Earth. No judgment, no shame. You have families to think about. But anyone who stays, I need you ready to fight. We're going to make these bastards bleed for every inch of this station." She cut the transmission. Webb stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Commander, we have mining equipment and 43 security personnel with small arms. They have warships. Then we better get creative," Chun said. She pulled up the station systems on her display. "Call everyone with engineering or demolitions experience to the main conference room. We have 24 hours to turn a mining station into a fortress." The next day was chaos. The miners and engineers worked like demons, transforming their peaceful station into something else entirely. Mining charges, normally used to blast apart asteroids, were reprogrammed into proximity mines. The ore haulers, big slow ships designed to carry rocks, were stripped down and fitted with explosive payloads. Every mining laser was recalibrated to maximum output. The station's gravity manipulation systems, used to help guide asteroids into processing, were jury-rigged into weapons. 412 people chose to evacuate. 391 stayed. Chun watched the transport ships flee toward Earth, carrying children and those who couldn't fight. She didn't blame them. She envied them a little. When the Kethzer deadline arrived, Chun broadcast her response on every frequency. "This is Commander Sarah Chun of Viridian Station. We reject your demands. If you want this station, you'll have to take it from us. Come and try. The alien response was immediate. War Principal Desic himself appeared on screen, his face a mass of chitinous plates and too many eyes. Foolish creatures. You die for nothing. The Dominion is inevitable. Maybe, Chun said, but we'll make you pay for it. The first Kethzer attack came 3 hours later. 2 warships approached the station, confident in their superiority. Chun waited until they were close, then triggered the minefield. Dozens of mine charges, each one powerful enough to crack open an asteroid, detonated in a sphere around the approaching ships. The first warship's shields held, but the second one wasn't as lucky. Explosions tore through its hull, and it spun away trailing atmosphere and debris. The surviving warship retreated quickly. The humans in the control center cheered, but Chun felt cold inside. They had just made the Dominion angry. The siege began in earnest. The Kethzer fleet didn't approach close again. Instead, they settled into orbit and began a methodical bombardment. Viridian Station shook day and night as energy weapons hammered at its shields. The humans fought back with everything they had, turning mining lasers against warship hulls, launching ore haulers packed with explosives on collision courses, using the station's gravity systems to fling debris at enemy vessels. That it was desperate, improvised warfare. For every small victory, the humans paid in blood. The Kethzer adapted, learned from their mistakes. But they also bled. Chun's people destroyed 2 more warships in the first week, damaged 4 others badly enough that they had to withdraw for repairs. The War Principal had expected an easy conquest. Instead, he found himself in a grinding battle against an enemy that refused to understand when they were beaten. Other species across the galaxy watched the broadcasts. The humans made sure to transmit everything, every battle, every small victory, every defiant gesture. Chum spoke to the cameras whenever she could, her face growing thinner and harder as the weeks passed. "We're still here," she would say. "They thought we'd fold. We haven't. They thought we'd beg. We won't. Let them come. Let them try. We're human and we don't kneel." The siege stretched into its 2nd month, then its 3rd. The station's supplies dwindled. The casualty list grew longer. But the humans adapted, learned, fought smarter. They became guerrilla fighters in the vacuum of space, making the Dominion pay for every inch dot and across the galaxy. Conquered peoples watched. Humans fight and began to remember what courage looked like. The broadcast from Viridian Station spread through the galaxy like a virus. The Kethzer Dominion controlled communications across 73 conquered worlds, but they couldn't stop every transmission. Someone always found a way to listen, to watch, to share what they'd seen. On the water world of Pelshara, an elderly Pelshi named Shervin gathered his young in the underwater cave where they lived. The Pelshi had surrendered to the Dominion 12 years ago without firing a shot. Their leaders had calculated the odds and chosen survival over resistance. Shervin had agreed with that choice at the time. Now, watching Commander Chun's face on a smuggled datapad as she defiantly broadcast from a dying station, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade. Shame. "Look at them," he told his young ones, his bioluminescent skin flickering with emotion. "They have 43 fighters. The Dominion has 20 warships. By every logical calculation, they should surrender. But they don't. They fight anyway." "But father," one of his young said, "they're going to die." "Yes," Shervin agreed. "But they're dying free. We're alive, but we kneel." He made a decision that surprised even himself. "I'm done kneeling." Similar conversations happened on dozens of worlds. The Chari, an insectoid species that worked the factory moons of the Yor system, passed data chips between workers in the assembly lines. They watched humans turn mining equipment into weapons and remembered they had factories full of tools. The rock-dwelling Thanari saw how Commander Chum used her station's gravity systems as weapons and looked at their own planetary defenses with new eyes. The Dominion noticed the changing mood. War Principal Dexic, still locked in his embarrassing siege at Viridian, received urgent reports from across the Empire. Productivity was down. There were whispers of dissent. On 3 worlds, Dominion overseers had been found dead in what looked like accidents, but probably weren't. Dexic ordered crackdowns, public executions, orbital bombardments of rebellious settlements. He thought fear would restore order. Instead, it proved what the humans had been saying all along. The Dominion kept order through terror, and terror only worked until someone showed you could fight back. On Pelshara, Shervin and others like him began diving into the ocean trenches where their people had hidden weapons before the surrender. Plasma rifles designed for their physiology, torpedo launchers that could operate underwater, mines that responded to Kefsir ship signatures. Everything they buried rather than destroy, hoping that someday they might need them. Again, that someday had arrived. The first new rebellion began on a factory moon called Ur-5. The Churi workers had been watching Viridian's broadcasts for months. They'd seen how humans turned industrial equipment into weapons. One night shift, 3,000 workers simply stopped making Dominion war machines and started sabotaging them instead. By the time the overseers realized what was happening, half the factory complex was in flames. The Dominion sent warships to restore order. They found the Churi ready. Mining drones had been reprogrammed into missiles. Cargo haulers had become bombs. The factory itself became a weapon as the Churi used industrial furnaces and chemical vats as improvised defenses. The Dominion forces eventually crushed the rebellion, but it took 2 weeks and cost them 4 ships. More importantly, it showed others that humans weren't the only ones who could fight. 2 months after Ur-5, the Pelshi struck. Dominion ships patrolling Pelshara S orbit began disappearing. Wreckage would be found weeks later, torn apart by weapons that came from below the water. The Pelshi had gone back to war, and in their ocean environment, they were nearly impossible to stop. The rebellions multiplied. The Thanari sealed themselves in their mountain fortresses and dared the Dominion to dig them out. The Vex, a species of space-dwelling nomads, began ambushing supply convoys. Each new uprising broadcast the same message: we learned from humans. We don't kneel. Earth's government officially maintained neutrality. Humanity was still new to galactic politics, outnumbered and outgunned. Starting a war with the Dominion would be suicide. But unofficially, things were different. Human special forces began appearing on rebel worlds. Advisors, Earth called them. Volunteers who just happened to know guerrilla warfare tactics and weren't officially connected to any military. Commander Chum became a symbol, her face painted on walls across a dozen worlds. The siege of Viridian Station was still ongoing, now in its 4th month. The station was a wreck, running on emergency power with less than 100 humans still alive. But Chun's daily broadcasts never stopped. "Still here," she would say, her face gaunt, her eyes burning with defiance. "We're still here. They've thrown everything at us, and we're still here." War Principal Dexic was losing his mind. What should have been a simple conquest had become a nightmare. He'd lost 6 ships at Viridian, with 4 more damaged beyond easy repair. But worse than the material losses was the damage to Dominion prestige. Across the Empire, subject species whispered that Dexic couldn't even defeat a single human mining station. The whispers made him furious, but he couldn't deny the truth of them. He needed to end this. He needed to make an example that would break this growing wave of rebellion. Viridian wasn't enough anymore. He needed something bigger, something that would shock the galaxy back into submission. He needed to strike at the heart of human power. He needed Earth itself. Dexic began assembling the largest fleet in Kethser history. 300 warships pulled from every corner of the Dominion. He would take this fleet to Earth and burn it. He would show the galaxy what happened to species that inspired others to rebel. The humans had lit a fire across his empire. He would drown that fire in human blood. But as he gathered his forces, Dexic made a critical mistake. He assumed the humans at Viridian had been desperate and cornered, fighting because they had no other choice. He thought humans on their home world, with families and cities and everything they cared about at stake, would be more reasonable, more willing to negotiate. He was about to learn a hard truth. Humans at Viridian had fought because they were far from home and had nothing to lose. Humans defending Earth would fight because they were home and had everything to lose. And there was no force in the galaxy more dangerous than a human protecting what they loved. The news reached Earth like a thunderclap. 300 Kethser warships were coming, the largest invasion fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. They would arrive in 3 weeks. Every intelligence agency agreed. This wasn't a raid or a show of force. This was extinction. Earth's defense fleet numbered 97 ships, most of them older models that hadn't been updated in years. Humanity had spent its resources on exploration and colonization, not war. Now the choice looked like a fatal mistake. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. The chamber was filled with representatives from every nation, every colony, every human settlement across known space. The debate was furious. Some argued for surrender. Better to live under the Dominion than die fighting an unwinnable war. Others demanded resistance at any cost. The arguments went in circles until someone played Commander Chan's latest broadcast. She was barely recognizable anymore. Her face was covered in scars, her left arm in a crude splint. Behind her, Viridian Station was a ruin of twisted metal and failing life support. Only 23 humans remained alive there. They should have surrendered months ago by any rational calculation. "This is day 117, Chan said to the camera. Her voice was rough but steady. "We're still here. They keep trying to make us kneel, and we keep saying no. I know the Dominion is coming for Earth. I know you're scared. But I want you to understand something. Fear is just your body telling you that what you're about to do matters. And nothing has ever mattered more than this. Stand. Fight. Make them pay for every inch. Show them what humans do when you threaten our home. We're out here on the edge, dying, so that you'll know what's possible. Don't waste what we've bought you." The recording ended. The council chamber was silent. All in favor of resistance? The council chair said quietly. Every hand went up. Earth prepared for war. Every military vessel was called back from patrol. The shipyards went into overdrive, trying to build anything that could fight. But it wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. So humanity did what humans do best. They got creative. The asteroid belt was stripped of every rock larger than a house. Each one was fitted with guidance systems and explosive charges. The idea was simple. The Dominion would come in expecting a fleet battle. They'd get thousands of asteroids moving at significant fractions of light speed instead. Kinetic kill vehicles on a massive scale. The orbital habitats and space stations were evacuated and turned into weapons platforms. Every satellite in Earth orbit was reprogrammed. Communication satellites became jamming stations. Weather satellites became sensor nets. Even scientific platforms were fitted with improvised weapons. If it was in space and human-made, it became part of the defense grid. On Earth's surface, people watched the preparations with grim determination. Factories that made cars started making missiles. Chemical plants shifted to explosive production. Every person with military training, current or not, was called up. Children as young as 12 were trained on defense platform controls. The robots and automated systems could do a lot, but they needed human oversight. Everyone who could contribute did. The defense planning fell to Admiral Jessica Okonkwo, a veteran who'd spent 30 years in Earth's small navy. She looked at her resources and her enemy and knew the math didn't work. The Dominion had 300 warships. She had 97, plus improvised weapons that might or might not function. But she'd been watching Chun's broadcasts for 4 months. She'd learned something from that stubborn woman dying on Viridian Station. Sometimes the math doesn't matter. Sometimes you fight anyway. The Dominion fleet arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 300 warships in perfect formation, a show of overwhelming force meant to break Earth's will before the first shot was fired. War Principal Dexic broadcast his demand. Surrender immediately. Your rebellion ends here. Fight and die, or submit and live. Choose. The response came not from the Council, but from every human vessel, every station, every platform. The same message, broadcast on every frequency in the galaxy. This is Earth. You came to make an example of us. You came to break our will and crush our spirit. You came to show the galaxy what happens to those who resist. We invite you to try. But know this. Whatever you do to us, we will do to you tenfold. We are not trapped in this system with you. You are trapped here with us. Come and take it. Dexic ordered the advance. He expected fear, expected last-minute negotiations. Instead, he got a wall of asteroids moving at velocities that made them nearly impossible to intercept. The first wave hit his fleet like a hammer. Ships that had withstood orbital bombardments and fleet actions exploded under the kinetic impacts. Others had their shields overwhelmed, hulls cracked, systems failing. The Dominion adapted quickly, bringing point defense online, destroying asteroids before they hit. But that required attention and energy. While they focused on the asteroids, Earth's fleet struck from multiple angles. Human ships weren't stronger or faster, but they were desperate. They used tactics that no sane commander would approve. Ships with failing shields ran Dominion vessels. Damaged craft pointed themselves at enemy warships and overloaded their reactors. Every human ship that died took at least one enemy with it. The battle became a nightmare of fire and vacuum. The Dominion had expected a short, decisive victory. Instead, they got a grinding battle of attrition where humans traded lives. They couldn't afford to inflict casualties the Dominion had never imagined possible. The asteroid belt became a minefield. The space around Earth turned into a graveyard of ships from both sides. Admiral Okonkwo fought from the bridge of the battleship Defiance, coordinating the defense while simultaneously commanding her own vessel. She watched her fleet die ship by ship, but she also watched the enemy die. Every loss hurt, but every Dominion ship destroyed was one less that could threaten her world. They're breaking through the outer defense line, her tactical officer reported. Let them, Okonkwo said. That just means they're closer to our guns. The battle lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of constant fighting as the Dominion pushed through layers of defense. The asteroid belt cost them 40 ships. The orbital platform network cost them another 30. Earth's fleet, fighting in rotating shifts and using every trick they'd learned from 4 months of studying Chun's broadcasts, cost them 60 more. When Dexic finally reached Earth orbit with 73 ships remaining, he was exhausted and furious. This was supposed to have been easy. Humans were supposed to be weak, supposed to break under pressure. Instead, they destroyed 2/3 of his fleet. He prepared to give the order for orbital bombardment. If he couldn't rule Earth, he'd make it a tomb. A warning to every species that thought about resistance. Then something impossible happened. Ships began dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around the battlefield. Not Dominion ships. Not human ships. Ships from 17 different species, each one bearing the scars of rebellion. The Pelshi brought their underwater adapted vessels. The Churi brought repurposed factory ships. The Thanari brought fortress cities that could move and fight. All the species that had learned courage from humanity's example. All the rebels who'd been fighting the Dominion across the galaxy. They all came to Earth. "This is the Free Species Alliance," a transmission announced. "The Dominion's age of conquest is over. You came to break humanity. You've united us instead." The combined fleet hit what remained of Vesh's armada like a tsunami. The war principal tried to rally his forces, but they were already broken. They'd spent 3 weeks fighting humans and were exhausted, damaged, demoralized. Now they faced fresh forces from species they thought they'd beaten. The battle turned into a rout. Dominion ships broke formation and tried to flee. Most didn't make it. The final blow came when a ship called Viridian's Vengeance rammed Deck 6 flagship. It was crewed entirely by survivors from Chun's last stand, 23 humans who'd held their station for 4 months and finally been evacuated just days before its fall. They spent their lives to kill the war principal, and they did it with smiles on their faces. The destruction of the Dominion fleet at Earth sent shockwaves across the galaxy that would reshape interstellar politics for generations. Within hours of Deck 6's death, the first Dominion-controlled world declared independence. Within days, there were 42. Within months, the Kethzer Dominion, which had ruled 73 species across 4 galactic arms, simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way. The Kethzer themselves retreated to their core worlds, confused and angry. For 300 years, they believed their own propaganda about inevitable conquest and superior might. The idea that they could lose, that their empire could shatter, had never occurred to them. Now they faced rebellions on every border and a galaxy that no longer feared them. Most Kethzer commanders simply abandoned their posts and fled home, leaving their subject species to figure out freedom on their own. Commander Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the Unity, a hospital ship, and watched Earth grow larger in the viewport. She'd been in medical stasis for 2 weeks, recovering from injuries that should have killed her. Malnutrition, radiation exposure, dozens of broken bones, and an infection that had nearly taken her left arm. The doctors said she'd need months of rehabilitation. She thought she'd need years to process what had happened. "You're a hero," the ship's captain had told her. The woman who started it all. Chun didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired. She felt old, though she was only 37. She felt the weight of every person who died at Viridian Station. Every name she'd memorized because someone should remember them. 368 people had stayed to fight. 23 had survived to see rescue. The math of that haunted her, but she also felt something else. Pride, maybe. Or satisfaction. They'd done it. A handful of humans with mining equipment had told the galaxy's biggest empire to go to hell. And somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Not just at Viridian, but everywhere. The ripples from their defiance had become a wave that drowned the Dominion. Earth's orbital space was crowded, with ships from 100 worlds. The Free Species Alliance was forming, a loose confederation of former Dominion subjects who decided they worked better together than apart. Humanity, the newest species to reach the stars, suddenly found itself at the center of galactic politics. Not because they were powerful, but because they'd shown everyone else how to be brave. Admiral Okonkwo met Chun at the shuttleport. The Admiral looked as exhausted as Chun felt. Earth's defense had cost 91 of their 97 military ships and over 40,000 lives. The victory had been expensive, but it had been a victory. "Commander Chun," Okonkwo said, saluting. "On behalf of Earth and the United Colonies, thank you for your service." Chun returned the salute awkwardly. Her left arm still didn't work right. "I just did what needed doing, Admiral. Same as everyone else." No, Okonkwo said softly. You did more. You showed us how. You showed everyone how. The resistance movements across the galaxy, they all studied your broadcasts. They learned from you. That matters. Chun looked away, uncomfortable with the praise. How many? She asked. Total casualties across everything? Okonkwo's expression darkened. We're still counting. At Earth, 40,000 dead, another 100,000 wounded. Across the galaxy, the rebellions cost maybe 2 million lives, probably more. The Dominion's crackdowns before we beat them killed even more. She paused. But those 2 million freed 73 species. The Dominion had enslaved hundreds of billions. You do that math however you want. Chun did the math. She'd spend the rest of her life doing that math, weighing lives against freedom, death against dignity. She didn't know if the scales would ever balance. But she knew that given the choice again, trapped in Viridian Station with alien warships overhead, she'd make the same decision. Some things were worth dying for. The galaxy had just learned that humans understood that truth better than most. The weeks after the battle became a blur of ceremonies and speeches. Chun hated every minute of it. She was a mining station commander, not a politician or celebrity. But Earth needed symbols, and she'd become one. The woman who said no. The woman who turned the mining station into a fortress and held for 4 months against impossible odds. The woman who taught the galaxy that humans don't kneel. She gave speeches she didn't write to crowds she didn't know, saying words about courage and resistance that felt hollow in her mouth. The only time she felt real was when she met with the other Viridian survivors. They understood. They'd been there. They knew what it cost. Marcus Webb, her former communications officer, found her after one ceremony. He'd lost an eye and walked with a cane now, but he was alive. You ever wonder if we did the right thing? He asked. Every day, Chun admitted. 345 people died because I refused to surrender. That's on me. They died because they chose to stay and fight, Webb corrected. You gave them the option to leave, remember? 412 people evacuated. The rest of us stayed because we wanted to. Because you made us believe it mattered. Did it matter? Chun asked tiredly. Webb gestured at the crowd beyond the window, a mixture of humans and aliens, all celebrating their freedom. Look around. I'd say yes. The Free Species Alliance officially formed 6 months after Earth's victory. Representatives from 47 species gathered in Geneva to sign the founding charter. The basic principles were simple. No conquest, no slavery, no empires. Species would govern themselves and cooperate voluntarily. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation, not warfare. It was idealistic and probably doomed to have problems, but after centuries of Dominion rule, everyone wanted to try something different. Humanity took no special position in the Alliance despite their role in its creation. Earth's government understood they were still new to galactic politics and had much to learn. But informally, everyone knew that humans had become the Alliance's moral center. When disputes arose, people asked, what would the humans do? When someone suggested backing down from a threat, someone else would bring up Viridian Station. The story of Chun's stand had become the Alliance's founding myth. The Kethzer, remnants tried to restart their empire twice in the following years. Both times, Alliance forces led by species who'd learned guerrilla warfare from human advisors crushed them quickly. The Kethzer finally accepted their new reality. They were no longer conquerors. They were just another species, equal to everyone else. Some adapted to the change. Others spent their lives bitter about their lost empire. The galaxy didn't particularly care which. Commander Sarah Chun retired from military service after a year. She'd done her duty, given her speeches, become the symbol they needed. Now she wanted to be just Sarah again, not a hero or an icon. She took a position teaching military history at Luna Academy, training the next generation of human officers. Her students always asked about Viridian Station. How had she known they could hold out? How had she kept fighting when the odds were impossible? What was her secret? There's no secret, she'd tell them. We were terrified every single day. We knew we'd probably die. But we also knew that surrendering meant something worse than death. It meant accepting that we were less than them, that our freedom didn't matter, that humans weren't worthy of respect. So we fought. Not because we were brave, but because being human meant we couldn't do anything else. 20 years after the siege, the Alliance erected a monument at the Viridian debris field. The station itself was long gone, destroyed in the final days of the siege, but the location mattered. A massive structure of crystal and metal floated where the station had been, inscribed with the names of all 368 humans who'd stayed and fought. At the center was a simple phrase in every Alliance language. They did not kneel. Chun attended the dedication ceremony. Old now, her hair gray, walking with a cane because her legs had never fully recovered from the radiation exposure. She stood with the other 22 survivors and listened to speeches about courage and sacrifice. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it brief. We weren't special, she said. We weren't the strongest or the smartest. We were miners and engineers and security guards who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Dominion thought we'd surrender because that's what everyone else had done. They forgot to consider that sometimes someone has to be first. First to say no. First to fight back. First to show that it's possible. We were first, but we were never alone. Every species that fought after us, every rebel who struck at the Dominion, every person who chose freedom over safety, they were with us. This monument isn't just for us. It's for everyone who learned that courage is a choice, not a gift. It's for everyone who decided that being free mattered more than being safe. It's for everyone who looked at impossible odds and said, I don't care. We fight anyway. She paused, looking at the names on the monument. The galaxy still tells stories about human defiance. I hope it always will. Not because humans are special, but because everyone deserves to know that resistance is possible. That dignity matters. That freedom is worth whatever it costs. We paid that cost at Viridian, but we bought something precious. We bought hope. And hope, it turns out, is the most contagious thing in the universe. The ceremony ended. The dignitaries left. Eventually, only Chun and a few other Viridian survivors remained, floating in the observation platform near the monument, looking at their friends' names written in starlight. Was it worth it? Marcus Webb asked, the same question he'd asked 20 years ago. Chun thought about all the freed worlds, all the species who govern themselves now, all the children born into freedom instead of slavery. She thought about the galaxy the Dominion had wanted, built on conquest and terror, and the galaxy that existed instead, built on cooperation and respect. She thought about her daughter, grown now with children of her own, living in a universe where humans were equals, not subjects. Yes, she said finally. God help me, yes. It was worth it. The monument rotated slowly in space, catching light from the nearby star, names of the dead shining like promises kept. And across the galaxy, parents still told their children about Commander Chun and her 368 volunteers who looked at the greatest empire in known space and simply said no. The Dominion was dust and memory now. But humanity's defiance? That was eternal. That would outlive stars. Because courage, once proven possible, can never be forgotten. And the galaxy would never forget what a handful of humans taught them above and nowhere. Mining station at the edge of space. That freedom is always worth fighting for. Always.